The Autumn Nations Cup might be a brand new competition, but it was nice of everyone involved to ease us in by putting out some of rugby's most familiar pairings, things that go together like Argentina and turning a promising start into a 30-point loss. Oh, wait a minute! Okay, we're talking Georgia and Beards, Duncan Weir and Glory, Italy and falling apart late on, Jodorowsky set slap and complaining, Nigel Owens and having to be front and centre of everything, France and not turning up, England and eating tier 2 nations alive, Scotland and injuries, and then one of the oldest and most tempestuous pairings in rugby, Wales and Ireland. Wales against Ireland is normally one of rugby's most fierce contests because unlike Springboks against All Blacks or anyone against England, Wales and Ireland aren't enemies, they're rivals. Warren Gatland always used to say England was the game the fans focused on, but Ireland was the rivalry the players got really fired up for. And whilst a few glorious scuffles did help keep passions in an empty stadium up, ultimately things petered out a bit as Ireland cruised through Wales to a comfortable victory in this opening round. And in turn, this led to another of rugby's most frequent pairings, the Welsh and doom and gloom. So, just how bad were things for Wales, and where are Ireland 6 games into a new regime? Now, I get that extreme pessimism at the slightest sign of doubt is an innately, incredibly Welsh trait. It's what we have, it's what we're known for. And I know I certainly also got caught up in a bit of that at half time. However, look, I'm sorry to say this, I'm sorry to do this, but before I can get onto anything about Ireland, and I know they won, I'm really sorry about this, anything about Ireland, anything about any of their players, including their shiny new winger who was tearing you apart, Wales! I feel it's my civil duty as a Walish person to confront this issue head on and scream from the rooftops. Things are not nearly as bad as they appear. Wales at the minute are like the plot of a Coen Brothers movie. It's an exploration of just how huge the fallout can be from a few tiny problems occurring. The final scoreline was ugly. This was Ireland's biggest win over Wales since a battering in 2006 that led to then coach Mike Ruddock resigning mid-Six Nations. However, the cause for his counterpart Wayne Pivac to do similar are counterintuitive, and I'm going to say it, silly, because this situation is immensely fixable. The suggestion is that Wales are lost. They're baffled, confused, pointless, which admittedly is a word I used last week, when that isn't the case at all. When Pivac took over, he decided, instead of building on or slowly altering Gatland's game plan to be his own, he was going to tear it up completely and just do his own thing from the off, completely. This was a calculated risk, and it backfired. However, to get rid of Pivac at the end of this tournament, or even this week as some are saying, would be to make exactly the same mistake he made again, but on an even grander scale, because at least Pivac ripped things up with some sense of long-term vision. It's a bit like Wales have gone hiking up Snowdon in November in sandals. They've hamstrung themselves massively, and now blisters are starting to appear all over their feet, but they're not lost. They're still on the path they set out for. They've got a good, experienced and previously successful climber at the helm, and they're still aiming to make it to the peak. It's possible that in a year, 18 months' time, frostbite is going to set in and we're going to need to amputate, but for the time being, Wales do not have an option better than Wayne Pivac. Firing him will just be outright silly. Scott Robertson is not going to tear up his Crusaders contract just because Welsh Rugby Twitter wants him to. And the problems with Wales' game are, and it might not appear this way on first viewing, I didn't think so on first viewing, but they're not that big. They're just inconveniently placed. It's like getting a paper cut on each of your vital organs. So let's be more literal. I've used a lot of metaphors, I'm very aware of that. What went on? Well, for starters, this week Wales fired their defence coach, Byron Hayward, and boy did it show. Now, I've watched this game 3 times in full, and large segments significantly more than that, but I'm lost to tell you what kind of defensive system Wales were running at the weekend. On some phases, they would basically wait on the gain line and soak up tackles. On others, every player shoots up faster than Begsby on a bad day, with little attempt to hold a line, just applying pressure for pressure's sake. Players frequently didn't seem to know what the man next to them was going to do, and this ever-changing style made it very easy for Ireland to exploit. Here, they play a simple crash ball off the line out, and then Justin Tipuric sprints up aggressively to take Doris, while the rest of the defence just saunters up, and it creates a disconnect. Doris pops the ball back to Gibson Park and it's instantly trouble. Lewis Hughes watches the two men on the inside. John Davis is doing his best to shut down the options outside, but without Tipperick there's no one to watch Jewelry Box Sexpod, and he's able to just canter right through the gap, fix Halfpenny, and then is unlucky James Lowe can't take what would have likely been a try scoring pass. Lowe then goes
chicken.
Liam Williams,
Are you just a little chicken?
Meaning we get the rare treat of watching two wingers fight, which is a joy akin to seeing two squids enter a limbo contest. However, Ireland then run exactly the same moves 6 minutes later, but Wales have learned a lesson. They pause still and hold their ground in case the pass comes. They then drift up and cover it very simply. The system might be faltering, but aside from a last minute score by James Lowe, where Doris exploits the Welsh back row staying down to shove and manages to fix Sheedy, leaving Watkin with too much ground to cover to make up in time to make the tackle, the Welsh defence was otherwise very solid. And this ties to something Pivac himself has said, and something I'd very much agree with. From his experience, the most important barometer of any team is their work rate without the ball. It tells you how tight a team is, how fit a team is, and most importantly, their mentality. It was this hunger off the ball that made you think 5 minutes into Saturday's game, hold on, I think Argentina might win this. And whilst everything else has as good as gone to pot, this, in both games against Scotland and Ireland, has been there for Wales. This was noticeable in the one big immediate change from Hayward's defensive system. Even during a dour half-time phone call to my brother on why we wanted the world to end before full time, we agreed that the one thing Wales were doing well in that half was attacking the Irish breakdown. Unlike under Sean Edwards, where Wales would contest almost every opposition ruck, Hayward liked his team to stand off and fan the line. This hasn't really worked, so Pivac decided to change it, and the improvement was obvious and almost immediate. Ireland had around 80% of the ball in the first half, but only scored one try. There were a few crucial turnovers, such as this by Shane Lewis Hughes, or on a try line here by Justin Tipperick, but perhaps the most impressive of the lot was this by Tipperick again. His intervention doesn't win the ball, but this is a try-saving moment, make no mistake. He slows really fast ball just enough for Welsh cover to get across and for Adams to eventually put Conway into touch. However, the breakdown on the whole remains a big work in progress for Wales. Against Scotland last week, Cymru were getting their forwards into set structure. They kept failing to protect the ball and letting Watson and Ritchie turn them over time after time after time. This remains a little bit of an issue, but it's mostly from broken field. Whenever there was a kick, a line break, whatever, Wales' ball retention plummeted. However, their solution in the rest of the time, in more standard play, has become occasionally something of a problem in itself. Here, Wales sent it to Liam Williams, our first phase, and used two forwards from the tail of the line out to clear out whilst the others work around the corner. Hopefully, the idea is faster than Ireland's can, allowing for two big carries to smash it up against smaller men and draw the backs in. This by and large works, and when the ball comes out, Wales have a bit of an overlap. Except let's rewind. After last week, Justin Tipperick sees some trouble at the first ruck and enters to kill any Irish turnover threat. This means, once the ball gets wide, Justin Tipperick is not out on the wing, as Wales would have hoped. A man down, an option down, Watkin throws a poor pass between Foxy and Halfpenny, where Tipperick would have been stood, and the whole thing falls apart. Goes into touch. Ball, chance, lost. The essential dilemma is this. How do Wales make sure they secure the ball for certain, whilst also allowing the likes of Tipperick, Faletau and Alwyn Jones to adopt wide positions for the sake of their attack patterns? Believe it or not, I believe the answer is one man. One man who can save Welsh rugby. Welsh hopes, who can bring pride back to the Principality, which I know isn't a Principality, but it's alliteration, so shut up. One man whose name I can give you right now. One man who could do all of this. Lloyd Williams. Yeah, it turns out it was Lloyd Williams the whole time. I know, like, honestly, go figure. Yeah, I know, I didn't see this one coming either. Just as Eddie Jones continues to pick Ben Youngs because he's a conduit who whips the ball away and box kicks when he has to, rather than someone who has ideas above his station and wants to run the game himself, like a Ben Spencer type. Williams is an extremely nuts and bolts player, and that suits the Pivac game plan down to the ground. Italy aside, the most consistent period Wales have had under Pivac was the time they spent with the ball when Lloyd Williams was on the pitch at scrum half at the weekend. This isn't a coincidence. Unlike Gareth Davis, who's always looking to snipe and pose a threat himself, Lloyd Williams is the rugby equivalent of middle management and just got Wales from ruck to ruck crisply, with this no-nonsense cleanness adding a pace to the game that allowed Wales to work the ball fast enough that they could afford to commit minimal numbers at the breakdown. A month ago, there was absolutely no way I'd have told you or believed you if you said Lloyd Williams is the key to the future of Welsh rugby, but it felt like seeing a piece of the puzzle, a piece of a puzzle we've all been struggling with, slot into place on Friday night. It doesn't have to be Lloyd himself. Any player in his mould would fit. I think either Rhys Webb or Thomas Williams were made to fit into that, with a more obvious attacking threat, such as Davis, then able to come off the bench. Friday initially felt immensely worrying. Wales had plenty of bad games under Gatland, but they never had 2 in a row. I think a lot of us took that for granted. However, whereas the Gatland era was a roller coaster of ups and downs, he'd introduce a system, it would win Wales a title or 2, then people would figure it out and it'd take them a year or 2 of tinkering to make it work again. Pivac's players instead are more of a steady climb. Snowden, if you will. Set pieces and discipline were atrocious, really, match-losingly bad, but they're fixable problems. I understand the pessimism, I really do, but Wales might have been bad the last 2 weeks, but I really do think there's something there, and I'm more convinced the more I watch them, the more I watch these games back, the more I think actually yes, it's bad at the moment, and yes, they're losing rugby matches, which is the most important thing, but I mean, this is not a World Cup year. This current tournament is, and I'm really sorry Amazon, the least important and prestigious campaign Wales will play between now and the warm-up games in 2023. And if there's any time you want to be sorting the niggles in the game, it's now. All the problems in the Welsh game are small, they're fixable, they're just having huge knock-on effects. So anyway, I'm really sorry about that. I'm sorry to any Irish people, any neutral, I'm sorry. I should probably talk about the team that won, because after their all-over-the-shop show in Paris, Ireland went big in on accuracy this week, playing some really neat rugby, employing a bag of tiny tricks for little gains that had big impacts. Quinru's try was very nicely worked. Look at how wide each Irish ruck is. It's just that little bit harder for Wales to sack at source from a wider ruck to stop the carry before it begins, as you'd hope would happen on the line. And then, for the try itself, Carey has just kind of shoved the ruck as part of his duty as the guard, trying to make sure Ireland know his presence is felt. But knowing this involvement means it can legally not be classed as obstruction anymore, Cian Healy grabs Carey and rolls him round the ruck, leaving Wales with no guard and allowing Rue to bounce off Rowland's tackle attempt and into the hole where Carey should be. And speaking of things that technically probably aren't obstruction, when something's referred to as an all-or-nothing play, you tend to picture a risky kick or a madcap pass, but this by Ireland fits the bill, as they're gambling on giving a penalty for something that creates an outright chance and should have been a try. As James Ryan takes position, he shouts something. This is a called move. He turns his body to hide Healy, so, as Gibson Park passes the ball behind him, Pivac has no idea that's where it's gone and tries to tackle Ryan. Ryan then leans in on Lee to try and tie him in as well, trying to cause ultimate chaos. It's a brilliant piece of just acting, and it completely opens up the Welsh defence. In fact, Cian Healy would score, but for the fact that Pivac goes so low on Ryan, one of his flailing arms attempting to wrap accidentally trips the man who actually has the ball, and Dan Biggar can hit him quick enough to stop him rolling over. They may not look flashy, but there's such thought and innovation going in to back up the grunt and guts for Ireland, because that was a really solidly good performance in Dublin. You can say Wales lost far more lineouts and scrums than they should have, and they did, but Ireland were the team who stole them. It wasn't a perfect performance by them by any means, there's absolutely room for improvement. But of the 5 Tier 1 teams who've changed coaches post-World Cup, Ireland do look the most consistent. They're solid and reliable, even when outplayed, and a bit like Wales, there are enough signs from this week that the game management and temperament issues that haunted them against France and England in the Six Nations don't have to be problems for long. And hey, what better chance to prove it than by taking on England themselves again next week, whilst Wales face Georgia, a team who, you never know, might be sniffing blood. This Autumn Nations Cup may be a new tournament, but the thrill at seeing the pairings lined up on next week's fixture list always remains exactly the same. Hello, thank you for watching that. I hope you enjoyed it. There are videos elsewhere on the channel on every game from this year's Six Nations in the men's competition, plus 2 from the women's. Please go and have a look around, go and hopefully you'll enjoy those. There were some videos from the Tri Nations, however they got ripped down by Sanzar's lawyers. So As you may have noticed, Argentina beat the All Blacks that weekend, and I kind of want to cover that because that's one of the biggest results in rugby since I started the channel. And yeah, I'm now in a situation in which I kind of sort of can't. So I've got a plan. Basically, the drill is that what's going to happen is I'm going to get this video up. I'm aiming for Friday. We'll see somewhere around there. And once it goes up, it's going to stay up for about a week or so. At which point, I'm going to take the video down myself, so that Sansa hopefully don't have a chance or don't, have a particular problem with it. Just a chance for people to watch it, people to hopefully enjoy it. And then once that's done, once that's finished, after the end of that period, it will still remain available for people that support the channel on Patreon. And I'm going to try and I'm going to hopefully upload the 2 videos on the Blezzo Cup, the first 2 rounds, again, for people that support the channel on Patreon again, so they can hopefully enjoy and watch those all over again, so they still remain available. This isn't my preferred method of doing it. I don't want to kind of hide things behind a paywall. I don't want to hide content. I'm going to work very hard on these sort of full match reports behind a paywall. It's not my preference at all, but I wanted to find a way to talk about this game, and that felt like the best way around it, in which I can try and get it to as many people as possible whilst keeping it alive in some way and not risking the channel, not risking the kind of livelihood and all of this stuff I've built, by just keeping it up. So that's kind of the deal. That's what I've reached at the minute. If you are a Sanzal lawyer, please ask, don't, or just get in touch, just email me back, just email me back. Otherwise, I've rambled enough. That's the plan with Argentina. That's coming next. I apologise. I don't think I'm going to get time between these 2 games to cover Italy-Scotland. I would have liked to because it was a very good game. But alas, that won't be the case. We'll move on to the next round of the Autumn Nations Cup. And, potentially, maybe even the Tri-Nations, depending on how things go. We'll have to see. Thank you very much. And I'll see you next week.
You're not good. You're just a chicken. Chip, 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 chip.